Reminds me of a friend I knew in middle school. He acted like the dumb joker. Always scored just enough for passing, usually by failing an exam or two, and then passing others just well enough to keep a C. He was also about 2 years older than the rest of the class. Back then, we took stat-wide standardized testing in 8th grade. This was just before No Child Left Behind. When we got our scores back, I can't remember how, but I saw his scores. Kid scored in the 99th percentile and everything across the board. I asked him point blank if he could do that. Why was he almost failing? His answer, my dad will beat me if I come home with anything higher than a C. He said it with such a straight face and without his usual nonchalant attitude. I hope things worked out for him. I saw him once after middle school the following year in the high school main office. He had dropped out. He had passed the age where you could do that, got his JED, was accepted into the police academy and overall seemed really happy. Most teachers whom I know and who go off on students simply refuse to believe anyone is stupid or otherwise unable to learn what they teach at the time. Others see a kid they know has a good average score and think they can't lack knowledge on any particular subject because of it. Few have gone after smart kids specifically, but even from those many do so because they are insecure and feel threatened by the child's intelligence. The single worst teacher I know works at a rather prestigious high school and is so insecure that he berates everyone equally but goes straight to war on anyone who questions his authority. He expects nothing short of perfection from everyone when it comes to scores and deadlines. His subject? Chemistry. He also directs at a workers' theater and expects every participant there to break their backs and sacrifice their private lives for no profit on every single play. Yes, I recognize I've had horrible luck when it comes to teachers, but bad ones are definitely out there. I think they congregate. Bad staff tolerates peculiar and toxic cases instead of laying them off for incompetence. Similarly, good teachers find one another because if you're one, chances are you end up working at a school with proper standards. I wasn't exactly a teacher, but an aide to help around the classroom. I specifically remember there wasn't much to do, so I was working on my app music theory homework, had to listen to a recording of the teacher playing chords/notes on the piano. Usually I wouldn't be able to do my homework, but today was a free time day. Well, this 3rd grader walks up to me and asks me what I'm doing. I told him, in simpler terms, I have to listen to some music and figure out what type it was. Now this kid had a very obvious learning disability. He wasn't so much disruptive, but he processed things much slower and unfortunately kids made fun of him for it. I could tell he was definitely interested, and as he didn't have any friends, I showed him the basics and showed him the recording. Well, after explaining the basics, it turns out this kid has perfect pitch. Not only could he name the notes that the teacher was playing, he could name all of the notes within the chord after only one walkthrough of me trying my best to explain it to him. At the end of the day he knew what a major, minor, diminished, augmented, etc. sounded like. I told him he had a gift for music. I'm not sure where he is now, but I really hope he pursued something in the music field. TL, Doctor, 3rd grader has perfect pitch and helped me with my app music theory homework. I don't believe this student was stupid, but he loved talking back to anyone in an authoritative position and not doing his work. Never turned in homework, talked during class, would yell across the room and fight with other students. I had to call his dad once, who came in that day and set him straight, which in that area was so refreshing to see. He went back to it eventually. I think if he ever put effort in he would have done well, much like a lot of kids. But at age 12 in a rough area, most don't/won't. He was never disrespectful per se. If you told him 100 times to stop talking he'd laugh and go, oops, sorry miss, alright. Anyhow, one day I was giving a PowerPoint, and like any other day lots of background conversations. I was getting frustrated after needing to ask kids to be quiet at least 20 times already. I took a few steps back to sit in my chair and was next to it, not in front, and ended up falling down. All the students laughed, but that one I described was the only one who said, "Are you okay, miss?" He asked me twice and even stood up, and I did mention to his dad when he came in that in a room of 30, he was the only one who bothered asking instead of just laughing. He did laugh, I did too after a moment, but the consideration Not exactly a smart thing via stupid student thing, but one of the lowest performing, most disruptive students had his moments where he was the kindest. I teach English as a foreign language, and one of my Costa Rican students brought a bottle of Smirnoff to class. I left for a quick bathroom break to ask my boss if I should confiscate the liquor considering my students are all around 15 to 16, and she asked if he was being disruptive to the class. He hadn't been, so she said I could let it slide and just observe and see what happened. The student in question hadn't really participated much in the weeks prior and had struggled to integrate into classroom activities. He's not necessarily the stupid student, but rather the one who never really participated. So class goes on and the young man has consumed several shots with no shame, and we start a conversation activity. While the rest of the students are doing pretty well and using most of the vocab, all of a sudden this student goes off in some of the best English I'd ever heard my students speak, talking about all sorts of social issues in Costa Rica and comparing them to other parts of the world. Apparently the kid didn't have a lack of knowledge, he just needed a little liquid courage to fully participate. After class I asked him why he didn't participate as much before this lesson, and he said that he never thought he had it in him before today. I told him that, while I appreciated his sudden wealth of participation, I'd like to see him try to participate sans the alcohol in future lessons. He didn't really, but I thought it was an interesting story. One of my 14-year-olds from my special educational needs class last year made a surprisingly perceptive comment during our first few lessons studying of mice and men. This kid was autistic, had very little in the way of empathy skills, didn't speak English as a first language, and had the average reading age of a 7 to 8-year-old, so reading was not generally amongst their favorite activities. We'd just finished looking at the bit where George says how he and Lenny keep getting chased out of towns because of the things Lenny does wrong, and this kid got real quiet in the discussion. I went over to privately ask what was wrong, and they turned to me and said, why are they being so mean to him? Don't they know he has a disability? So I was like, well bud, people in those times didn't necessarily understand as well as we do today about those sorts of things. He looked at me and said they don't always understand them today either. Broke my heart. That class ended up loving that book. Lots of them really identified with Lenny and got really into the story. Not my student, but this was told to me by a colleague. This girl wasn't necessarily dumb, but had some severe mental issues that made you think otherwise sometime. And I'm not talking a learning disability or autism. She was a schizo and had multiple personalities. Anyway, this girl is in the first grade and something happens that annoys her, and she makes that exclamation, oh I could just kill you, or something similar. So the kid had to meet with the principal to explain that telling teachers you could kill them isn't really something appropriate. So the principal said, girl, you didn't really plan on killing Mrs. So-and-so, right? And the kid responded, of course not. I had nothing to use. I don't necessarily think he is stupid, but he did the worst in school on tests and schoolwork out of any kid I had substituted. I asked him if he was having a hard time understanding the multiplication, and he said he had a hard time understanding his life. I helped him finish the worksheet, and I asked him what he meant by understanding his life. His home life was awful and his parents didn't let him sleep that night, like most, because they were up doing drugs and being reckless. He said, I just want to sleep before I go to school. I don't deserve that. He was right. He was in the 4th grade and that has stuck with me. A lot of times kids end up thinking that is just how it is, but he knew he didn't deserve that. I told the principal, but I'm unsure if anything got fixed. I had student last year while doing a leave replacement who was very quiet. She pretty much never spoke in class, and if I ever called on her to answer, she'd usually say I don't know very quietly. She was probably a C+/B student, which is alright but not great. After my leave replacement ended, I went back to subbing, and that meant cafeteria duty. I saw her in the cafeteria, and she was like a whole different kid. She was like, hi Mr. Nice, and became a little chatterbox. Sometimes I'd stand by her table and we'd talk, and it was crazy seeing her act completely different. What really threw me, however, was one day where she pulled out a Rubik's Cube and started solving it. I told her that I didn't know she was good with a Rubik's Cube, and she said, oh it's easy, you just need to know the algorithms. I didn't even think that she would know the word algorithms at all, based on how she was in class. Really made me think about how different people can be in different environments and situations. Sounds like you'd find John Holt's books How Children Fail and How Children Learn interesting. The former in particular makes the case that schools, by their organization, are so focused on teaching to pass exams and following a set curriculum that they are often both boring and scary places for students. Students typically respond by using their brains differently in and out of the classroom, thinking most intelligently outside, while in school they are focused less on learning and more on finding strategies to give right answers and avoiding seeming stupid in front of teachers and peers. Holt's criticism is with the school system overall, not with the efforts of individual teachers who have little choice but to work within it. He was also a teacher himself and is in no way against them. He wrote the book after observing many children acting much as a girl you described it. As a GA teaching freshman English, I had a couple instances of cheating that left me speechless. First, my university uses an online plagiarism checker, and the students know this. With one student, over half of his essay was copied from a website. He looked genuinely shocked when I called him out on it, and then told me that his mother wrote the paper for him. I explained that his mother writing his paper was also cheating. Then he asked if he could get credit for the half that wasn't from a website. Another time, the students had to analyze a movie showing how it used the hero's journey as plot structure. This was an easy assignment seeing as how nearly every modern movie uses this structure. The student copied the Wikipedia summary of Aladdin word for word, and he denied doing it. He argued it was a coincidence that his entire essay was the exact same as Wikipedia's. Not my student but a co-worker's. She had a kindergarten student who she brought to my door. He was in tears. The teacher was very angry. "Tell Mr. Lobstasley why you're crying." The little boy replied, "The bastard won't let me play with the fucking boat." Somewhat taken aback I said, "What?" He repeated, "The bastard won't let me play with the fucking boat." I took one look at the teacher and said, "I think you'd better take him to the office." She brought him to the assistant principal's office, and by now the kid was in near hysterics. My co-worker said, "Tell the assistant principal why you're crying." Through snot-bubbled tears, he sputtered, "The bastard won't let me play with the fucking boat." At this point all of the commotion has caught the attention of the principal. She bursts into the small office and demands to know what's going on. My friend Mark, the school security guard, causally walked in behind her. "What's going on?" demanded the principal. "Tell her," said my co-worker. Again the refrain, "The bastard won't let me play with the fucking boat." The principal almost lost her wig, screaming about how we don't use that kind of language at this school and so forth. Meanwhile Mark, who knew this kid and was very surprised by his outbursts, asked, "Who had the boat?" The boy replied, "Sebastian." "Tell me what the boat looked like," said Mark. The boy sniffled and stuttered, "It had a D-dragon on the front." "Oh, so Sebastian wouldn't let you play with the Viking boat?" With a giant sigh of relief the boy repeated with his slight speech impediment, "That's what I've been trying to tell everyone. The bastard won't let me play with the fucking boat." True story. Funniest thing in my 25 years of teaching. I heard it clear as a bell. The bastard won't let me play with the fucking boat. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more daily 6 PM Reddit uploads.